Okay, let's talk about some key webinar concepts. So the first of which is that in a webinar you have the host or presenter, and that's the person leading the webinar who is sharing their desktop, and then you have participants who are people who are observing or listening. Most webinar solutions give you the ability to switch host and participant at any given time, and the functionality is there to do that on an as needed basis. So a meeting could start with one person as a host who's sharing their desktop, then as other people need to share their desktop, the host or presenter capability is passed to them. Now keep in mind, as we said earlier, that in addition to sharing the entire desktop, you can also choose to share just an application, and then you also have chat capability available via a webinar. Chat means that you can type messages and share those messages with everyone in the meeting or just with a specific person. Now, in terms of sharing the desktop or actually conducting the webinar, there's two modes in which you can do so. The first of which is you can start a webinar right now and ask people to join you right now. And in that mode, you typically start up a webinar, having session ID allocated, and then connect with people via phone and tell them to go to mykogo.com, type in the session, and join you. Or you can schedule a webinar session for later. In this case, within the mykogo software, which is software we're using, you'll actually schedule a session and then send an invitation to people via email telling them the date and time and how to access that webinar session via telephone and via the internet. It's also very common to record webinars and then to so that people who are unable to attend the live webinar can listen to the playback version. So you, for example, right now are listening to a playback version of the webinar. Now, in terms of how voice is handled, we also call that audio. There's a couple ways in which that's typically handled. Some very sophisticated webinar solutions, such as WebEx, will actually call the participant. So you connect to the conference, it'll ask you your telephone number, and it'll call you. mykogo, which we're using, actually enables you to call into a central number, and everyone calls into the same number. And then finally, there are some systems where you pay a little bit more money and you can get an 800 number that everyone can call into. So keep in mind that for many people, there's some setup involved in accessing the webinar. So first time users, join early, allocate 5 to 10 minutes to just go in and do all the setup prior to the start of the meeting so that you're ready to go. In accessing a webinar, there's two modes in which you can access it. One of which is as a participant, you can access in an HTML viewer mode, and that basically means that you're using a browser to access the webinar, and and you don't have to install any software. In this particular mode, you get limited functionality. You're missing functionality such as the ability to chat, to schedule a session, and a few other things, but you can see the desktop that's being shared. Anyone on the conference who wants, or on the webinar, who wants to act as a presenter must install the software, so that then as the host or presenter role is shared with them, they have full capability available. If they don't install, then they will not have the ability to be a host or presenter. And then finally, some webinar solutions, and mykogo is one of those, actually gives you the ability to control another person's desktop. So if you need to help that person with something or troubleshoot a problem on their desktop, you can actually in many cases use a webinar solution like mykogo to control another person's desktop remotely and then assist them.